controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are a science here to make things make sense.
Okay, yeah, give me your no, it's too. It kind of sounds like laughing sometimes,
which is so cool because laughing and crying, we cannot tell the difference when you take the tears away. Okay, wow.
Where did we begin with crying?
Okay, I have a question I want to start with.
Okay,
when is the last time that you cried?
Well, as I said, I had such a bad week, but I didn't cry this week, so I guess it was more stress induced than it was like emotionally sad. But
like, when's the last time that well up the tears?
Pretty recently. I mean, not to talk. I don't want to talk about it on the podcast. Just obviously, I've had like some like family things happen and like deaths in the family, and obviously it's been a hard time. So I feel like for me, that's like lingered around recently. But those are kind of like obvious reasons to cry. I can't remember the last time,
but that's
which is
totally,
okay. I'm
yeah.
not diminishing it. I'm just also saying I'm trying to remember the last time that maybe I just was like so sad about something else. But
you've cried without like an obvious stimulus?
Oh, for sure.
Whoa.
All the time, I'll just be like, I'm so sad. I'm just gonna cry.
Oh, girl, right? Drop the album. That's amazing. I mean, that's obviously not. Or is it? Oh my God, crying is so weird.
Wait,
crying
when's
is so
the
weird.
last time you cried?
I'm like, Soul, the movie Soul.
Oh, I teared up in that, but I didn't cry.
Okay, now another amazing question.
Okay, is there?
Do you think this is? I'm reading this book called Adult Crying, a biopsychosocial approach. And do you think that crying means a tear must fall from eye, or if someone tears up in soul, is that not crying? Because there's like a really interesting thing that humans do where we go, oh, you almost cried. But you're like, no, a tear didn't fall, but I was clearly crying if you want to define it from like endocrinology.
Yeah, I
like you said, I teared up. I didn't cry.
Teared up. Yeah, I guess it's to me not a spectrum, but a scale, right? So I imagine it like, yeah, I kind of started to cry, but I didn't go all the way there. Because there's a lot of times when if I get started, then it's kind of easy to keep crying.
So that is biologically a part of crying, is that once you have started, it is harder to stop.
Yeah, and it kind of feels good, and it's easier to keep those emotions and even the mental imagery of stuff once you start. But in the movie, for example, like I teared up at like an impactful moment, kind of like you get the shivers, and then I had it, but I wasn't like so sad. It was for that movie, it was more like poignant for me than like crying. I don't know if I cry for poignancy. I know maybe some people do. I don't know if you do, but
for sure, Soul. I bet there's millions of people on this nation that Disney's Soul made them well up, but not a full cry.
Yeah, no, and also when I'm watching a movie, I'm kind of like, well, if I cry, I'm gonna get distracted.
So Noah and I also cried in Nomadland, which is a really good movie that comes out in February. We torrented it. Sorry, we will pay at the time because I really want the director to get the money. So the moment when a certain person has passed away and that like you see they just had like those 3 goals in life, and then you see that they like met them and you have the footage of it, I actually fully cried then, because I think I only welled up in Soul, whereas the Nomadland one, I was like, I am fully crying. And in fact, if I wanted to, I could pause this movie if I was alone and just like
have a full cry.
Yeah, have a full cry. I mean, you might be at the point where you've known me long enough where it's like, okay, Greg's gonna have a full cry.
Greg's a crier in movies for sure.
Oh boy, it's like the only way I can.
I think maybe I've mentioned this here before. It is, and it's also like will fully take me out of the moment because it can be so. I don't want to say over the top. It's not a negative thing. It's just like you cry very openly in movies and very loud, and it makes me laugh. Probably because I'm uncomfortable with crying,
which is so interesting, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
I'm not
it
like
could be
that's not something I'm proud of.
It's not, no, I know, and it's hard probably in the moment to go, I'm going to join you. Like crying is such a weirdly isolating thing in many ways, and as we get into the studies, we might learn how you might be trying to like your body might not know what to do in that moment for a variety of reasons.
Sure. Yeah.
Including being like, what the fuck, why are you wailing your eyes out? Because I do lose control, and I like to cry. It's like not
it's endearing.
Easy for me to cry. I think like in general, like obviously sad, tragic things can make me cry, but the thought of you being able to go into a room and be like, I'm sad and cry is like extremely foreign to me. So when I get the opportunity through movies, like I actually sometimes I'm like, let's fucking roll with this, baby. Billy Elliot's in and we gonna cry.
Oh, I can cry to Billy Elliot. Let me tell you, since I was a young lad, that movie made me cry.
My sister is so funny. She loved Billy Elliot. My sister also wails in the movie theater. Actually, I mean, I could tell many a story. My mom.
What a coincidence that you love whales.
Yes. The blowhole in my case is snot out of my nose. My mom almost kicked me out of a movie ever after because I could not stop wailing. And like the people in the theater were like, we can't concentrate. But my sister also loved Billy Elliot. And I remember her crying for hours in the theaters. It was so funny. Like there's that moment where they kind of reference the mom and then the latter 40 minutes. Like, he's just a boy, Billy. Like when they cross the line to the coal. And they're like, he's just a little boy.
Oh my God. And I know it's so sexist, but when like a father figure cries, it gets to me.
Oh my God.
That's baked into this ideal that like women are able in our society, like not all, but I guess we're told as men that we shouldn't cry, right? So there's then this expectation that when a man cries, it's like he must be so sad that he can no longer hold it in.
Which is so sexist. Yeah, and it's so rooted in like the societal
it does like in that movie when the father cries, and they also build it because he's like such a stoic figure that would never cry, and then it's like the climax of the film when he cries, right? Like that's embedded in culture.
God. Billy Elliot's about crying, kind of.
My God.
But I will say I do not relate to that at all. Women always are what make me cry in movies. That's what gets me. Like it's so interesting that you can notice that. I hadn't even thought of that, but I really have a heart. Like even Billy Elliot, I'm like, okay, like I'll cry, but like it's not the dad, for sure. The kid.
Oh, I know it's not just the dad. I just mean I know that's a narrative for others as well, where it's like when a like man who you wouldn't typically think would openly cries. Maybe like we're going to talk about this in my study too, like understanding genuine sadness and what tears mean. I think there's an expectation that a lot of men would repress their crying. Like they would never want to share it. So if they are, there's like this extra level of like, oh my gosh, it must be so genuine, because otherwise for some men, this would be so shameful.
Whoa, Mitch, that's so intense. Like that's so interesting. No, and I can't, and no, I just also think it's interesting that you're able to like know that. I just wouldn't have thought about that when I cry in movies, but I'm like, you're right. That is definitely why that moment, probably like a family movie where the dad cries and the mom cries, like they're like that, men probably relate to that more. It's for men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But what I was gonna say was that my sister like we got Billy Elliot for Christmas and we watched it and she got a phone call. She left for truly the whole movie. Like me and my mom watched the movie and she was on the phone, came back, almost instantly sat on the couch, and it was like near the part where he's like, he's just a boy. She just starts wailing, like truly wailing and like genuinely enjoying the movie. I'm like, you miss all how are you like it was amazing to me. But I was like, our family, movies is where we cry.
Mm-hmm. It is. I want you to tell me about some science that you learned about crying.
Okay, so first of all, like, because I've been reading this book, I have like this sort of like
I want to read that book.
It's so interesting. But you talking about men and women and crying less and more, I think we should just talk about it now, because I just finished that chapter and it's like surprisingly not what you might think. Okay, first of all, studying crying is so freaking hard because you can't like they are always like, we are having a hard time studying this, because it's like, how do you go like make people
now cry?
Yeah. Or and like you can't
other than maybe
hurt.
Pain tear. You could,
but it's not ethical.
Sure,
they're not. They're not like come sit down and be like, wah! And like
right. But you could give like onion tears. You could like, I'm sure there's some stimulus, or you could pinch someone.
But there you go. Okay, so onion tears. That is a form of irritation and chemical stimulation of tears. That is not crying. That's not psychogenic tears.
But is pain?
Pain is not psychogenic tears.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. So maybe you could induce like those kinds of tears.
Yeah, which is a completely different neuronal system and lacrimal apparatus.
Yeah, it's
than
absolutely bizarre that we cry emotional tears.
It's the only animals on the planet, potentially in the whole universe, which is why I'm obsessed with it. But also, it's important for you to now, and for people to understand, that's why it's hard to study emotional tears. You're right that we could study like
like the physical
onion
tears.
tears.
Yeah.
But emotional
of
tears, it's like
course.
how, because it's so complex.
Like you gotta like go to like places where people are sad and collect their. You know what
Oh
I
my
mean?
God,
Like
but
a
then that's
funeral or
so
something.
messed up,
No, I
like,
know it
going
would
to
always
funerals.
like border this line of unethical.
Yeah.
For sure, unless people were consenting. But even then, it would be bizarre for sure.
But kind of like as like a science-minded person, I'm like, can we just go to funerals and just be like, just like put the tears in here?
Okay, but that's twisted.
Is it twisted?
Yes,
Is it
that's
twisted?
twisted.
But like if I was like at a funeral, I'd be like, okay, well, take some of my tears. That's really cool. And I'm just going to keep mourning over here.
There must be better ways than that.
I actually don't know if there is.
you would like
like, how
you
do
would like get people to come and join your study if they had just had a bad breakup, and then you'd be like, I really want you to think about how you'd get a therapist and be like, talk about how sad you are, and just try and prompt them
I
to cry.
love that, like a lab coat being like, so that breakup, babe, pretty
Must
dang
be pretty,
bad.
pretty
Purdy's doing
sad
well
for
on
you.
Instagram. So one thing they do is play sad movies, and honestly, it's like book us with the Billy Elliot, and Mitch is gonna be crying because of the dad. I'm gonna be crying because of the mom, and we will cry. So they do that. They do use movies and try and make people cry. And what they have found through studies is that women cry more in those situations.
Like in movie type
In these
situations.
lab tests where they're playing movies, and they do through a variety of psychological studies think of women as more empathetic and able to cry
Like
more.
connect more with those characters,
Yes.
feel what they're feeling, and
And then men, on the other hand, cry more from pain, which is really interesting.
really,
Based on 2 studies. Again, I always just want to say blanket statement, really hard to study. These studies aren't
like so
black and white.
like yeah,
But from like a couple studies, men
conclusive.
cry more from pain, including in the ages of 11 to 16, like high school, when you'd think like like boys are really trying
supposed
to like
to be so tough. Like,
Yeah.
pain especially. It's like you're supposed to not cry when you're in pain.
Exactly. And self-reported crying, there's not much difference between men and women. So it's like it's
Yeah,
not
that makes
as
sense to me.
obvious.
I would have
Yeah.
thought like if you said that I would think men would hide it more in public maybe, but would experience it probably just as much.
And crying when it comes to boys versus girls, like as younger kids, they find that there is sort of that switch off moment where guys start to cry less than girls around 11, and they can't tell if it's so obviously like what you said, like big
Like a
boys don't
social,
cry
yeah.
social, or also hormonal, they're going through
Right.
puberty.
And maybe
They've-
it's physically or it's like
they literally gave
physiologically
testosterone.
different.
They gave testosterone to mice, and like their version of like sad like never happened. Like it was like testosterone was like
really?
a poison to like it was like
it just
again,
turned into angry maybe.
yeah, they just had a harder time. Like they did this interesting study on mice, but they were like, well, when mice get a shit ton of testosterone, they're like
Stop.
not like quote unquote
Sad.
crying. Like
Yeah,
they
'cause they
obviously
don't
induce
cry.
it. Yeah, true. I mean, do they?
But you just said humans are. I mean, they might get
Yeah, true,
sad.
true,
like
true.
dogs can
Sorry.
cry, whine, but they don't get tears. out of
Yeah,
their
yeah,
eyes.
yeah.
Other animals, elephants are known to be emotional and sad and connected. Like when they lose a friend or a child or something, like they mourn. But I don't know if they're crying tears.
That's so interesting. Elephants don't cry emotional tears, as we said. Humans are the only ones, but they cry very often
like
from irritants.
vocally? Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, there's this really cool moth that survives by irritating elephants' eyes and drinking the tears. So,
oh
like,
my gosh! But that's the irritant.
Yeah,
kind.
and
Okay.
people actually, as you said, like we think elephants and crying because there's like folklore around it because they actually produce so many tears from the irritants.
I hate that so much. Imagine we had moths that bothered us so much to drink our tears. How upsetting that would be.
I also love like it is so epic to be like, I'm gonna drink your tears, bitch. You know what I mean? Like what? Like those
Ew,
moths.
just imagine like sitting doing your work and like a moth trying to land on your eye. I would hate that. I would cry because I'd be like, I can't live in this world. Oh, like when I go to a butterfly conservatory, even I'm like, oh my god, there's too many around me.
Oh my god, that is a really good like horror film for you. It's like going in and all of a sudden like all these butterflies like I think they're trying to drink my tears, and like no one will believe you.
Yeah.
Arachnophobia, but butterflies drinking
my
your tears.
Or it's it's coming. What's that movie called where like it's like a STD that follows the people?
It follows.
It follows.
Yeah.
Imagine it's just a butterfly.
Yeah.
And you're like, I swear it's just one butterfly, and everyone's like, okay.
And
it's a
everyone
butterfly.
else sees it as this beautiful butterfly, so they gas at you. But when you see it, it's like a treacherous moth. You know what I mean? Like, and you're like, and like, look at its eyes, and they're like, what?
They're
The
like,
eyes are
"It's so
gorgeous.
beautiful."
Yeah. That would
nice
actually probably be about you going insane, though. You know, like at the
Yeah,
end,
but
it'd
that
like
would
the
be
cheap
me.
end. Yeah,
I
that's
am
true.
afraid of butterflies. Like I think they're beautiful, but it's like as soon as they fly towards me, I'm like, you're way too unpredictable.
I feel so bad because I really like moths, but I think you're like when we are up north, for example, you get scared of them, and I'm like, I'm wanting to.
They're just okay. Like
I'm not going to help you by saying they drink elephants' tears. Like that's scary.
And moths, like I think all animals are beautiful and amazing creatures, but truly, butterflies are way cuter than moths. And moths, because moths are like hairy, and also the way they fly is so erratic.
Oh my gosh, it's just towards the light because I think it's the moon.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, I can't. It's like a spider where you're just like, you could go any which direction right now, and that is terrifying to me.
Interesting.
And it's kind of like, why are you flying into me?
Because
I understand
because you turned on your flashlight.
I know. I understand that it's not their fault, but sometimes I feel like spiders like will run in the wrong direction.
Oh my god, okay, girl. Spider's so scary. I will have you with the spider.
A moth is an air spider. That's all I
Oh my
have
gosh.
to
Okay,
say.
see, to me, know what moths are? Weirdly like baking soda. Like when you hit them and then you're like, why is that turned into a pile of baking soda?
That's true.
I think that's part of why I'm not scared. Like the few times where maybe I've killed one or mistakenly stepped on one and looked at their little like puff like angel powder dust.
Honestly, if it wasn't unethical, it would be like an amazing drag makeup.
Oh, they've done moth drag makeup.
They've used moths?
No, remember Shea Coulee, her
Oh, but I mean
inspiration was
like
a moth.
literally like, you know when you touch a moth and it's like shimmery.
Oh, you mean like insects on your face?
I said it. No. Like you would take the powder from them.
Oh my god, Mitch!
I said if it wasn't unethical, okay?
Do you think moth? I love it.
I'm like whenever it gets on my finger, I'm like, ooh.
You're like,
this is
I'm
shimmery.
so scared of moths, but grind that shit up and then I'll put it on my face, no problem. I'm like, isn't that scary to drop dead moths on your face?
I mean, I'm sure people have put dead animals on their face. Like, isn't that what they did for like lipstick, like beetles and like blush and stuff?
And people wear like dead foxes around their neck when they're like
I'm
rich.
not
and,
saying
like,
I'm
go to
doing it.
Empire.
I'm just saying when I touch a moth, I'm interested in how shiny it is.
Okay,
When
well,
it's
where did this come from?
Crying, they try to eat your tears.
Sometimes
Horror
people
film.
comment on this podcast. They're like, it's really interesting, but like sometimes they deviate so much, and then they're like, maybe they should stop deviating. Like 3 out of 5 or whatever. It's like always about deviating, and now I'm like, oh shit, why are we talking about moths? But
No,
yeah,
you know what?
tears. Come on.
I'm sorry. That's just the way life is.
No,
you
and
know?
I think that maybe other people like it. Comment below if you like it. Okay, we're back.
We're back.
And we're back. So, when we cry as kids, it is likely, babies, a response in order to get caregiving from our mom.
You just that was so you were like, when we cry as kids, it is likely babies.
Yeah, because I realized I'm like, it's not
As
accurate
babies.
to say like kids because these studies are on babies,
Okay.
right? When I say kids, you picture probably not a baby.
Yeah, I pictured
Yeah.
like a 6-year-old.
Sorry. So you come out of the womb crying. Crying is an evolved
Babies.
trait. And babies. In humans to get caregiving from your mom.
Okay.
And that's for me where the most robust science is, like the biophysiology of a baby's cry can actually like produce milk in the mom, like all these really interesting things. And then what happens is as babies start to grow up and have the ability to speak, and actually their certain cortexes of their brain increase for language, they are able to then cry less, they think, because they can communicate differently with their caregiver to get what they need.
Right.
When you're young, it's actually the
like-
first thing you do.
And crying is just kind of like this one source signal that can be like any. Even as a parent, you're like, okay, they need something. I don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I've got to figure it out now. Are they tired? Are they hungry? Are they what?
Exactly. And they cry apparently 3 hours every 3.5 hours after feeding. Like it's like
As a signal
as
of
a
like, I'm
signal.
hungry.
Yeah, I'm hungry. And then also interesting things where at first they cry, I think it's 4 months in general, wailing, like there's no pointed anything. But after 4 months, they start to notice the babies will point their cry to their caregiver. Like they'll like reach and cry, like be like, I need you. Whereas before
Right.
that, it's like they're just like
something help me.
yes, yeah, it literally
That's
like
how I
God
feel.
help me. And also I know it's like, what does it mean about being born a human that the first thing you do is come into this world crying, and then the doctor's like, check, emotionally devastated, good, healthy. Like
yeah,
that's
it's
the
like
thing.
not crying, something's wrong.
Literally like not crying. You're here and enjoying this world. Wow, something is up. You are probably need to study your
broken.
brain.
We need to break you.
Yeah, like literally, you're not broken, not good. Actually, like that's a brilliant metaphor for how messed up life is.
But no, but also how normal and healthy crying is.
Exactly. And there's just some interesting, not that good studies though about crying really has evolved so that we get people to come and make us feel better as a signal that we understand, it feels better to help them. They need help. And that like maybe we have evolved to cry so that you will look after me and like hug me and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Wow, crying, just so special.
Yeah, no, I'm obsessed with it and I wish I could do it more. Can you practice crying?
Of course. I think you can practice anything. And I think just giving yourself space to be in your emotions is like practicing crying. Because I would say that for me, I have noticed that I have a harder time crying in a movie, even Billy Elliot, if you're there. And obviously that's a social construct that is a problem. Around other people.
Anyone.
No, anyone, yeah. Not
I'm
just,
am I that dead inside?
And
like,
when you're around, no, I just mean when I'm not alone. It's so much easier for me to cry when I'm alone. So obviously there's that element of practice and allowing yourself to be comfortable.
Yeah.
To get to the point of that vulnerability. It's like inescapable vulnerability when you're crying.
Yeah, for sure. And once you start, it is harder to stop. That's one thing that it physiologically is hard to stop. So sometimes there's like this trepidation. You're like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to control myself. Like it's like you get really like if you're alone, you can go, okay, it's
like,
not gonna matter.
The time. Yeah, and I can like really indulge in this. I want to talk more about this, but should we take a little break? And I have a really cool study about how we interpret tears.
Yeah,
but
and just crying is like it makes you feel weird. Like I feel weird. I'm like
okay, we will be right back. Okay, so yes, crying is weird. I'll talk a little about my study and then we can pick up any last minute conversations around this because it is like there's so many interesting things that could be just talked about how you relate to crying. But my study was on how tears impact our visual attention. So viewing somebody who's crying, what happens to the person that's watching them. And the study came out in December 2020. So it's a really new study.
Oh, cool.
So basically it was kind of one of those classic studies. I think this kind of has maybe been done before, but they put eye trackers on the participants. I don't know what that is or what that looks like. I think it's software that evaluates where your eyes are looking while you're like viewing something.
There's so obviously technology around that because so many studies use that now.
Yeah, to see like even for social media, I think they use it. They study like where your eye goes because they want to put the most or like the things that'll make you buy stuff there. You know what I mean?
It's like social media truly has control over our brain. If that's what they're doing, like girl,
it's like
else.
Well, if there's any indication, they should put tears on the screen because I'll tell you why. So basically. These people would be shown pictures of faces, and those faces were fairly neutral. So they called it a calm cry because they didn't want like all the signals of like a wailing cry or an extra sad face. It was just kind of like, you know, when you're sad and there's tears on your face, like that kind of thing. And so those pictures were also duplicated to remove the tears, which I know they have done in studies before just to see the impact of a face without a tear and the same face with a tear.
And it's hard to tell if they're crying. Sometimes you think they're laughing at a
Exactly. And so this study in particular was looking at like, so where do your eyes go? How does it change when you're viewing a face that has a tear? That's the exact same as when it doesn't have a tear.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so the results showed that it was a completely different gazing pattern when there were tears on the face. So with tears, the participants spent way more time on the eyes and the right cheek, which in this case was where the tear was.
Oh my God, for sure. I can even think of that. Like, we know when like one tear falls in a movie, you're like focused on it.
Yeah, your eye. It's like even like this is not even necessarily conscious. It's just like your eye goes to the tear way more immediately. And it was a much higher number of fixations. So that's like more times that they're doing it and for longer. Compared to a normal face, their eyes would have been, you know, more spread out. Maybe obviously your eyes would probably look at the person's eyes, but more evaluating the face as a whole. So ultimately it was just like the tears pull your attention. If there's a tear there, that is where a human looks, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then also they rated the ones that had tears as more emotionally intense and more sincere. So whenever a tear was there, it was like I would be more like, I think in the study they actually put phrases with the faces that would say like my boyfriend cheated on me. I actually think that was one.
Oh girl.
And so there was like they were more likely to believe them and think it was genuine if there was a tear.
Yeah, for sure.
So ultimately it just said that this reveals that tears change how we perceive faces both qualitatively and quantitatively. So how our eyes look, where they look, and how many times they look there.
That is so juicy. Like, it's so true. It's like this weird thing that we do that we don't even know why we do it. It's so cool to know, but like we know we're obsessed with it. Like we know that we're like, wow, that is a sign of something.
Yeah.
And it makes that tear is so, it's like, what came first, chicken or the egg? Movies make us obsessed with the tear, or the movies are about like the thing we're obsessed with, which is like the single tear?
It has to be that one, Greg.
Yeah. Well, I'm just like, I don't know. We do get taught in movies.
You're right. It's
don't you feel like the
self-perpetuating.
spotlight kind of goes and it's like, oh my God, like Olivia Colman produced a
Yeah,
tear.
but I think it is that tears are a evolutionary means of communication that is most of the time, I don't have a percentage, but let's say like 90+% of the time genuine and hard to fake. Yes, there are some people that can manipulate their tears, but most people can't. So when someone cries, it's such a communication that something is genuinely wrong.
Yeah. Know what's interesting? Okay, that makes me, the manipulation thing is a really fascinating part about this book too, because they say that men have a hard time empathizing with women, and or actually not just women. Men have a hard time empathizing unless someone cries. Then they find it.
Kinda like switch.
Yeah.
It's like they don't quite believe it until there's a tear.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, maybe.
And so people do manipulate tears. They have found like men and women are able to do it. And like the other study, they're like, well, maybe because like sometimes you need it, and it's like the only way to get it. That they actually are like people are like, you might have manipulated tears in your life more than you realize.
Because
somehow.
but is it the question is, what are you manipulating? If it's because you need support, then is that really not what tears are for in the first place? Like, is that truly a manipulation that's conscious versus being like, I want to get something from someone and I'm going to now go cry because I know I can get it. Like, there's different kinds of manipulation.
I honestly think in those studies, I want to reread them and be like, what was their definition of manipulation? Because that's really interesting.
Well, one last caveat I didn't bring up from my study was that participants that scored higher on an empathy test, so all of them were given empathy tests, found their feelings towards the picture more intense in either direction. So they felt that when there was a tear, the person was more sincere, and then when there was no tear, they were more likely to disbelieve.
That's
Whereas people who scored less on empathy just like were more flat in terms of their response, which I thought was kind of cool.
So have you, like, I'm just thinking about these studies. These must be like psychology studies.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the ones that
Well, I guess it kind of like they're not looking into the neurology in this case. It's really just, it's interesting because they've set up eye trackers. So obviously there is like this quantitative data that they can say, look, there literally is 17 times it looked at the tear. So it's not necessarily about how the brain is interpreting things. It's like the literal, here's how your body's actually functioning.
Wow.
But I do think ultimately it's psychology.
Yeah, because crying is also just like so interesting, because then I'm like thinking about the world, and I'm thinking about like when we were in India and how they so vocally were mourning death and crying in groups. Whereas like I feel like in the society that I can only understand in my upbringing in Canada, it's very like private. It's like even in the movies that we're fed, it's very like
you kind of hold it together until you're alone.
Yeah. And so I'm just curious, like, I think I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these studies are like a Western
That's
context. True. And also, have you heard about like the issue with WEIRD, the acronym with psychology studies?
Weird.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should make a video about this. But they've essentially found that so many of these studies are based on those like university courses where in order to get credits, you do a psychology. Like, we didn't take psychology.
Right, but it might be one of those courses that you like have to take. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, like I think when you're a psychology student, you have to, for credit, be involved in studies.
Okay.
So you like go
That's
and
fun.
So what they found out is that psychology studies have predominantly studied people who are the acronym WEIRD, which is like Western, industrialized. Like, so
that makes sense.
A lot of psychology research is being like
kind of questioned.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, this is a very.
Say, like,
we should do this.
It's one perspective.
Yes. Exactly.
How do we now make sure it's like looking into other cultural?
Yeah, exactly. Socioeconomic statuses. Like, there's so many. It's just an interesting thing that I was reading about recently, and was like, I bet a lot of these studies of crying that we are talking about are in that world that I'm so curious about humans on this planet and their relationship to crying.
Because there is such different. Even if everyone feels sadness, obviously everyone feels sadness from death, from tragedy. You're right. Like, there's a different sort of some cultures, I think, just not embrace death more, but can have cultural traditions around death.
We're literally so weird about death.
Yeah,
like funerals are so like cold and like the casket and the thing and the thing, and everyone's like, oh, so how
and
you
it feels
doing?
so taboo.
Yeah,
you know, even as people in like the world that we've grown up, I've never been really taught how to communicate about it without the fear of hurting someone more.
Exactly.
Without feeling like I could say the wrong thing and that could be awful. You know what I mean?
Know what else? It's like that single sort of like one Kleenex dab of the eye, like at the. It's like
yeah.
no, like we're all
Just
so
cry,
sad. Let's
yeah.
all cry. And I'm pretty sure whenever I'm at a funeral, I'm always like, oh, did you? They're crying. Like you're like you're looking for like the like I cry the most. Like I'm just thinking about funerals when I see other people at funerals crying. I try to cry like the whole time because I'm like, and so and then like if I'm ever like, okay, I want to cry because I look around and I go, there's one like me. And then I cry
or it's just
something.
like, you know, seeing someone else in pain and then having the kind of like empathetic part of you that goes, that hurts me. And someone else, presumably if you're at a funeral, you're around other people you know or love, like seeing other people in pain is really sad.
We should wail at funerals.
I mean, I think that is cool and beautiful. My only
Me and like I do ruin the funeral. I'm like and everyone's like, what is like he like freaking it's not your funeral.
yeah, it's like you don't even know the person. You're Mitch's partner.
I actually okay, fine, you're right. There's a balance. There's a fine balance.
And there's a cultural sensitivity to being around. Who are you around? And also some people might want to genuinely like, yes, we get imprinted with our own social expectations, but surely some people naturally would be more likely to be private and some people would be more likely to be outgoing with their sort of sadness. So I think there has to always be space for that, where it's like it would be so nice if everyone could openly share it, but of course some people would rather do it privately.
And also I love is like it has to be genuine. No, it is the worst when people fake cry.
What do you mean?
Like I'm like, of course, like it's like it would be bad to be like, hey guys, now at the funeral we all wail, and then
Yeah,
having
people
people fake being like, what? Like because in my life I think I like maybe have done it when I was younger, but you know those people who you're like, you're not crying, like that's
Or
so
like the panic stricken if you were at a funeral and you're supposed to cry on command and you're just like
that would make you feel way worse. That's so true. Okay, so like everything binaries, there's a happy medium. I think we're more towards that we need to cry more openly. But
yeah, and we're living in a time where even just talking about mental health and the openness to have that conversation, to leave space for it, to say, hey, you don't have to cry, but know if you do, it's okay. And you won't be shamed for it. It's not embarrassing. It doesn't show weakness. Like we've definitely been conditioned from our generation and of course the older generations that crying is weakness.
Yeah, that's so
Whereas
true.
I do think that conversation is happening now, especially even towards men. It's like it's men that cry, that's so powerful. You own and are comfortable with your emotions. Doesn't make you weak. Doesn't mean you have to cry. Doesn't mean if you don't cry, something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
But if you want to, that's okay.
I honestly think that while we're alive on this planet, a big portion of like the general thing that we're going to be wanting to teach like men is like, you gotta cry more. You know what I mean? I feel like we're in the like men gotta cry more part of the textbook. It's
Right,
like
yeah,
there's
yeah.
like we realized that society had pushed men a bit too far towards the dangerous, violent anger part. And you know, like I'm just like, yes, men should cry more.
my God.
We should put
It's such a
on-
release. Don't you feel that when you cry, it's like it can be addictive. Like you kind of mentioned that. I don't know if you had anything else to say on it, because it is sometimes when I'm sad, and I've read some and touched on some studies that are like, you know, when people are feeling depressed, even clinically depressed, they actually prefer to listen to sad music, and it actually is cathartic.
Well, okay, what that makes me think of from the most scientific angle I think I can get at from that is that like when you're crying, there is this sense that so many things have welled up within you that it's like broken past a threshold that you need to like let it out. So in the past, before the science caught up, there was a lot of sort of debunked science that's like prolactin and hormones actually leave your tears, getting rid of chemicals like stressors in your body. Like people were really obsessed with this idea that it has to help. Like maybe the emotional tears
It's like
evolved.
getting rid of something.
But there's again, it's just really hard to study emotional crying. So maybe that is right, but there's not enough science, and some things have debunked that. But the language of it, the fact that you cry as a baby before you're able to develop language, kind of is what they also think about adult crying, is that it's situations where you emotionally don't know how to communicate your feelings. So it's like your lack of language, quote unquote. You now can speak English or like use your hands, but I mean, and if you're in other speaking countries, you probably can speak many languages, but as English speakers are really dumb. You still cry when you can't communicate an emotion. Is it
That's really cool. And honestly, I was going to say something similar because I was going to say we are so limited by our language that I think that's why music can be so cathartic, because even outside of being sad, I think music, even music without words, can express feelings that you literally cannot put words to. So sometimes I listen to like beautiful music, and of course, if it's tied to stories you've heard or a movie or things that you love, I've literally had moments where I'm like, this is a feeling I've never got unless I've listened to this music.
I only cried in Soul during the music parts. Like I
so
totally
touching.
think that
It brings
music
it.
is integral to a lot of the cries in my life. For sure. And you're right. It's like
And
a
I think
language
it's
I
a
can't.
language,
Yeah.
And
That's
I
so
think
interesting.
that ties, of course, this is anecdotal, but tied to that idea of maybe we cry when we can't express ourselves
I
properly.
honestly
or
cried
don't
to that-
understand our emotions. Well,
yeah,
for
I
sure.
cried to the recent SZA song, and I'll say in general, I cry to SZA songs. Like I think we all try to SZA songs, but I cried recently to a SZA song because I was like, that is exactly what I've been trying to say, and I've never been able to say it. Do you know what I mean? Like it was like a musician through a song
says something where you're like, oh my
Yeah,
God.
because they're not like speaking English. They're not like, and it's hard. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
Dixie
so
D'Amelio is
artistic.
not to drag, but like she's like, I'm sad now. Like, but like sometimes metaphors or these things, it's like books. It's like they're able to almost like have a new language to make you cry.
That is beautiful. That is the point of art, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay, guys.
express feeling.
So you tuned into Sidenote and we figured out what art was. Okay.
So, are you gonna try and cry more? Or should we try and cry tonight?
I would
I think it has to be
do
genuine.
that. No. You can. I would love to try and cry tonight.
Like, do something sad. Put on a sad movie. Put on.
You're
sad
already
music.
doubting. Let's cry tonight. Like we can do it, right? We don't even need. Do you think we need
Greg,
a stimulus?
Please
Hold my hand and cry with me, thine.
You look at me. You think you can do this? You think I'm not trying to be shady, but
I think I could do this. I think I could do
this.
this. I'm sitting up straight.
We're holding hands right now,
think-
and I'm trying to look him in the eye, and he won't even look me.
Oh my God, I literally will cry now from looking in the eye of you. I'm literally think I could do this. I think I could cry right now.
Okay, cry.
Okay.
What makes you sad?
Oh my gosh, guys, would this go viral if I cry right now? That's short for viral.
I don't think so.
Oh my
but-
God. Okay, guys. So under pressure, and if it's gonna go viral, I could cry. You just watch me actually deflect in real time.
I know you're panicking. It's
Well,
okay.
okay, it's
this
hard.
is certainly not a moment to cry.
Okay, let me try. Okay. Let me.
That is what is so impressive of actors as well,
Okay.
when they just like cry on
Mitch.
command.
Will you try with me, or I'm actually gonna try? I'm truly gonna try, and I know I keep.
I mean, I'm down for this. I don't know how effective this will be on a podcast audio, like for the YouTube.
Okay, you
people.
have to quiver the lip while I cry. Okay, I'm giving you 1 minute on the clock.
But I think I can fake start it, but it's not the same as a real.
Okay,
you know,
we're looking here. We're gonna try. Okay, we can edit this out.
you're gonna listen to this for 1 minute in silence. No, I can't do that.
Know what I do? I like
too
yawn.
weird.
I yawn, but then don't allow it to fully go, and then my eyes water. Is that a thing?
That's cheating.
Yeah, everyone on Degrassi used to do that. I can see like Drake pretending to yawn
Yawning.
cry. He can't
Oh my
act.
gosh.
Actually, Drake was one of the better ones.
Uh,
Okay.
But we'll try off pod and we'll come back and we'll let you know if it worked. Maybe next week we can follow up on our cry session.